Oh, hello, great readers. I'm Belchan.
I'm Nimakong.
I'm Banchan.
In this class, I'll read to all of you a part of Great Expectations.
As.
Oh.
Great Expectations. Charles Dickens. So, 38th Sec 1. Haunted when I am dead. It will be haunted by my ghost. Are the many still a little that my body be where it would. My spirit was always wandering about that house. The lady with whom Estella was placed. Mice. Branley by name. Was a widow, with one daughter several years older than Estella. The mother looked young, and the daughter looked old. The mother's complexion was pink, and the daughter's was yellow. The mother set up for frivolity, and the daughter for theology. They were in what is called a position, and were visited by numbers of people, little, if any, community of feeling subsisted between them and Estella. But the understanding was established that they were necessary to her, and that she was necessary to them. Mice. Branley had been a friend of Miss Havisham's before the time of her seclusion. In Mice. Branley's house and out of Mice. Branley's house. I suffered every kind and degree of torture that Estella could cause me. The nature of my relations with her, which placed me on terms of familiarity without placing me on terms of favour, conduced to my distraction. She made use of me to tease other admirers. A constant slight on my devotion to her. If I had been a secretary, steward, half-brother, sinned myself further from my hopes when I was nearest to her. Beginned, under the circumstances, an aggravation of my trials. And while I think it likely that it almost maddened her other lovers, I know too certainly that it almost maddened me. She had admirers without end. No doubt my jealousy made an admirer of every one who went near her, but there were more than enough of them without that. I saw her often at Richmond. I heard of her often in town, and I used often to take her and the Branleys on the water. There were picnics, fight days, plays, operas, concerts, parties, all sorts of pleasures, through which I pursued her, and they were all miseries to me. I never had 1 hour's happiness in her society, having her with me unto death. Throughout this part of our intercourse, and it lasted, as will presently be seen, that our association was forced upon us, and in all her many tones, and would seem to pity me. Pip, she said one evening, come into such a chat, when we sat apart at a darkening window of the house in Richmond, warning not to be attracted by you. Do I mean? If you don't know what I mean. I should have replied that love was commonly repeated blind. My miseries be a feeling that it was ungenerous to press myself upon her. when she knew that she could not choose but obey Miss Evesham. My dread always was that this knowledge on her part laid me under a heavy disadvantage with her pride, and made me the subject of a rebellious struggle in her bosom. At any rate, said I have no warning given me just now, for you wrote to me to come to you. That's true, said Estella, with a cold, careless smile that always chilled me. After looking at the twilight without for a little while, she went on to say, "At said it, you are to take me there, and bring me back, if you will." She would rather I did not travel alone, and objects to receiving my maid, for she has a sensitive horror of being talked of by such people. Can I take you? You can then. The day after tomorrow, if you please. You are to pay all charges out of my purse, and must obey, said I. This was all the preparation I received for that visit, or for others like it. Miss Havisham never wrote to meet, nor had I ever so much as seen her handwriting. We went down on the next day but one, and we found her in the room where I had first beheld her, and it is needless to add that there was no change in Sada's house. Saw them together. I repeat the word advisedly, for there was something positively dreadful in the energy of her looks and embraces. She hung upon Estella's beauty, hung upon her words, hung upon her gestures, and sat mumbling her own trembling fingers while she looked at her, as though she were devouring the beautiful creature she had reared. From Estella she looked at me, with a searching glance that seemed to pry into my heart and probe its wounds. How does she use you? Then, how does she see you? She asked me again, with her witch-like eagerness, even in Estella's hearing. But when we sat by her flickering fire at night, she was most weird. Then, keeping Estella's hand drawn through her arm and clutched in her own hand, she extorted from her, by dint of referring back to what Estella had told her in her regular letters, the names and conditions of the men whom she had fascinated. And as Miss Havisham dwelt upon this role, with the intensity of a mind mortally hurt and diseased, she sat with her other hand on her crutch stick, and her heart on that, and her warm bright eyes glaring at me, a very spectre. I saw in this, wretched though it made me, this that Estella was set to wreak Miss Havisham's revenge on men, for a term. I saw in this a reason for her being beforehand assigned to me, sending her out to attract and torment and do mischief all admirers, and that all who staked upon that cast was secured to lose. I saw in this that I, too, was tormented by a perversion of ingenuity, even while the prize was reserved for me. A scheme, in a word, as, and always had had her before my eyes. And I saw in this, from the sun, the candles that lighted that room of hers were placed in sconces on the wall. They were high from the ground, renewed. As I looked round at them, and at the pale gloom they made, and at the stopped clock, and at the withered articles of bridal dress upon the table and the ground, upon the ceiling and the wall, I saw in everything the construction that my mind had come to, repeated and thrown back to me. My thoughts passed into the great room across the landing where the table was spread, and I saw it written, as it were, in the folds of the cobwebs from the centrepiece, in the crawlings of the spiders on the cloth, Annals, and in the gropings and pussings of the beetles on the floor, and Miss Havisham. It was the first time I had ever seen them opposed. We were seated by the fire, as just now described, and Miss Havisham still had Estella's arm joined through her own, and still clutched Estella's hand in hers. Estella gradually began to detach herself. She had shown a proud impatience more than once before, and had rather endured that fierce affection than accepted or returned it. What said Miss Havisham, flashing her eyes upon her? Only a little tired of myself, replied Estella, disengaging her arm, and moving to the great chimney piece, where she stood looking down at the fire. Speak the truth, you ingrate, cried Miss Havisham, passionately striking his stick upon the floor. Estella looked at her with perfect composure, and again looked down at the fire of the other. That was almost cruel. You stuck and stone, exclaimed Miss Havisham. You cold. What said Estella? To be continued.